I had spent 35 years being invisible in my own family, but I never expected my sister to say it out loud at our mother's funeral dinner in front of everyone. "You're the child Mom never wanted." Madison pointed her fork at me, smirking. "Everyone knows it. Why do you think she stopped calling you?" The table erupted in laughter. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who shared my blood but had never once defended me. I felt their eyes crawling over my skin, pitying, mocking, confirming everything Madison said. I gripped my napkin under the table until my knuckles turned white. I said nothing. What was there to say? I had believed it myself for 15 years. Then the front door opened. Attorney Miller walked in carrying a sealed envelope. "I apologize for interrupting, but Mrs. Gibson left specific instructions. This letter is to be read tonight before the will tomorrow." He broke the seal. The room went silent. When he read the first line, my sister's face went pale. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers. What my mother wrote in that letter, it destroyed everything Madison had built for 15 years. "My name is Natalie Gibson. I'm 35 years old, a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm in Chicago. I built my career from nothing after leaving home at 18, and I've spent the last 15 years trying to prove I was worth something to everyone except the people sitting at that dinner table. But let me go back to earlier that evening before the lawyer arrived. I had driven 4 hours from Chicago to Connecticut for my mother's funeral. The last time I'd been in this house for a family gathering was 10 years ago at my father's funeral. That day, my uncle had pulled me aside and said, "Your father died wondering why you couldn't be bothered to show up sooner." I had arrived 6 hours after Dad passed. I didn't know he was dying until Madison called 3 days after he was hospitalized. Since then, I'd been back only 3 times. Each visit lasted less than 2 hours. Each time, Madison hovered over every conversation, answering questions before Mom could speak, steering topics away from anything meaningful. I stopped trying to call 5 years ago. Every time I dialed the house, Madison answered. "Mom's resting." "Mom doesn't feel like talking." "Mom said she needs space." After dozens of those conversations, I gave up on the phone, but I never stopped writing. Every month for 15 years, I mailed a letter to this address. I wrote about my life, my work, my loneliness. I asked questions. I apologized for things I wasn't sure I'd done. I begged her to write back. She never did. Not once. So when Madison stood at that dinner table and announced that I was the child Mom never wanted, part of me believed her. The silence from my mother had confirmed it for years. What I couldn't understand was why Madison kept lying about the rest. "We tried so hard to include her," Madison told the relatives gathered around the table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "I called her every month. I wrote letters. I begged her to come home for Christmas, for Mom's birthday, for anything. She always had an excuse. Her career came first." She sighed dramatically. "Mom died still hoping Natalie would come back to us." I sat frozen. I had never received a single call from Madison. Not one letter, not one invitation. But what could I say? The whole family already believed her version. They had believed it for 15 years. Then Aunt Helen approached me. She was my mother's younger sister, a woman I barely knew who lived in Florida and rarely visited. She touched my arm and whispered, "Natalie, did you ever get my birthday cards? I sent one every year. Madison gave me your address." I stared at her. "I never received any cards from you, Aunt Helen." Her face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, then something darker. Before she could respond, Madison appeared beside us. "Aunt Helen, could you help me in the kitchen? I need someone to arrange the dessert plates." As Madison led her away, Aunt Helen glanced back at me. Her expression stayed with me for hours. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I finally opened the envelope Attorney Miller had pressed into my hand. "Your mother wanted you to have this tonight," he had said. "Read it when you're alone." Inside was a single sheet of paper. My mother's handwriting shaky, uneven, written by a woman whose hands had been failing her. One line. "I found your letters, Natalie. All 127 of them. I'm so sorry I didn't find them sooner. Tomorrow you'll understand everything." I read it 3 times. Found my letters. I had mailed them directly to this house. They should have reached her within days. Where else could they possibly be? And what did 127 of them mean? My mother had kept count. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my hotel room staring at my mother's handwriting, trying to understand how she could have found Letters I had mailed directly to her house. By morning I had no answers, only more questions. But I knew one thing for certain: whatever was happening in that house, it was not what I had believed for 15 years. The will reading was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I arrived at 9:45 to find the living room already arranged with folding chairs. Madison sat in the front row, dressed in black tissues clutched in her hand. She had positioned herself as the grieving daughter, the one who had sacrificed everything. The relatives filed in behind her, the same people who had laughed at me the night before. They avoided my eyes now. Perhaps they sensed something had shifted, or perhaps they simply did not care enough to acknowledge me at all. Attorney Miller stood at the front of the room with a leather folder and a small cardboard box. He waited until everyone was seated, then cleared his throat. Thank you all for being here. Mrs. Gibson's will has 3 parts each with specific conditions for disclosure. We will begin with Part 1, which covers personal items and smaller bequests. He opened the folder and began reading. The jewelry would be divided equally among family members. Mom's car would go to Madison for her transportation needs. A few pieces of furniture were assigned to cousins. Then Attorney Miller paused and looked directly at me. To my daughter Natalie, I leave my mother's wooden box and all contents of the locked filing cabinet in my study. She is to receive the key from Attorney Miller and open it in her own time. I saw Madison's shoulders relax slightly. A wooden box and some old files. She probably thought I had been given nothing of value, but Attorney Miller was not finished. Mrs. Gibson was very specific about this bequest. She called it the truth Natalie deserved to know. Madison's head turned sharply toward the lawyer. Her face went pale. Attorney Miller handed me a small key and gestured toward the wooden box on the table beside him. You may open this now if you wish, or you may wait for privacy. I looked at Madison. She was gripping the arm of her chair so hard her knuckles had turned white. I decided I wanted to see what was inside while she was watching. I walked to the table and lifted the lid of the wooden box. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small photo album. I opened the album first. The pages were filled with 15 years of my life newspaper clippings about my promotions, printed screenshots of my LinkedIn profile photos that had been taken from a distance during my 3 brief visits home. There was a picture of me standing in the driveway looking at the house. I remembered that moment. I had been about to knock on the door. I never knew my mother had been watching from the window. Her letter was tucked into the back of the album. I unfolded it with shaking hands. Natalie, I thought you hated me. I thought you didn't want me in your life. Madison told me you said terrible things about me, that I was a burden, that you were glad to be free of this family. I believed her because you never called, never wrote, never responded to anything I sent. So I watched you from afar. I collected every trace of you I could find. I was so proud of you, my darling. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore. I'm so sorry I gave up trying. I could barely breathe. My mother thought I had never written to her. She thought I had called her a burden. None of that was true. I had written 127 letters. I had never said a cruel word about her in my life. Someone had been lying to both of us. I took the key from Attorney Miller and walked to my mother's study. The filing cabinet was old, heavy, locked, with a simple mechanism that clicked open when I turned the key. Inside were 2 thick stacks of envelopes. The first stack contained letters my mother had written to me, stamped, addressed, ready to mail. Each one had been opened. Some had notes clipped to them in Madison's handwriting: returned, wrong address, undeliverable, address unknown. But when I examined them closely, I noticed something strange. There were no postal markings, no stamps canceled by the post office. These letters had never been mailed. They had been taken from the outgoing mail and returned to my mother with lies attached. The second stack made my heart stop. These were my letters, the 127 letters I had sent over 15 years. Every single one had been opened and read. My mother's note was taped to the top of the stack. I found these in Madison's safe 2 years ago. She kept every letter you ever sent me. I never saw a single one until I found them myself. I sat on the floor of my mother's study and spread the evidence around me. My training took over. For 10 years, I had analyzed corporate fraud, hidden transactions, falsified records, elaborate schemes designed to deceive. I knew how to find patterns in chaos, and the patterns here were unmistakable. The dates on my letters matched my memories exactly. The letters my mother tried to send had no postal evidence because they had never left the house. Madison had intercepted outgoing mail and told our mother the letters were returned. She had intercepted incoming mail and hidden my letters in her safe. At the bottom of the cabinet, I found phone records. My mother had kept detailed logs of calls she made to my number in Chicago. Dozens of them. Each record showed the call as connected for several minutes. But I had never received those calls. I thought about all the times Madison had answered the house phone when I called, "Mom doesn't want to talk right now." I realized it had worked both ways. When my mother called me, someone must have answered and pretended I was unavailable. Or pretended to be someone else entirely. Madison had controlled both ends of the communication for 15 years. I walked back to the living room in a daze. The family was taking a break, milling around with coffee cups. I saw Madison in the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and strained. "No, you don't understand. She has the filing cabinet. I don't know what's in there. I need you to—" She looked up and saw me watching. She ended the call immediately and shoved the phone into her pocket. Her face was the color of paper. Then Aunt Helen appeared beside me. She took my arm gently and led me toward the kitchen, away from the others. "Natalie, there's something I need to tell you. 2 years ago, your mother called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she finally knew why you never responded to her letters. She had found something she wouldn't tell me what, but she said everything she believed about you was a lie." Aunt Helen's eyes filled with tears. "She made me promise not to tell anyone, especially Madison, until the right time. She said she needed to gather evidence. She said she needed to protect you." Aunt Helen squeezed my hand. "I think this is the right time." I had spent a decade analyzing corporate fraud, hidden transactions, falsified records, elaborate cover-ups designed to steal money and destroy trust. I never imagined I would find the same patterns in my own family, but the evidence did not lie. For 15 years, my sister had been running a scheme more elaborate than anything I had seen in my professional career. She had stolen my relationship with my mother. She had made us both believe the other one had given up. And the letters were just the beginning. The letters were just the beginning. When the family reconvened after the break, Attorney Miller announced that we would now proceed to Part 2 of the will. He explained that this section contained a formal statement my mother had prepared meant to be read aloud to everyone present. Madison shifted in her seat. I watched her from across the room. She had not looked at me since she saw me standing in the hallway during her phone call. Her hands were trembling slightly. She knew something was coming. She just did not know how much my mother had discovered. Attorney Miller put on his reading glasses and lifted a document from his folder. "This is Mrs. Gibson's statement notarized and witnessed 18 months ago. She requested that I read it in its entirety without interruption." He cleared his throat and began. "For 15 years, I believe my youngest daughter had abandoned me. I believe she did not love me. I believe she had chosen her career over her family and had no interest in being part of my life. I was wrong about all of it. My daughter Natalie never abandoned me. She was stolen from me by my own eldest daughter, Madison." The room went completely silent. I could hear someone's breath catch. Attorney Miller continued reading. "Madison told me that Natalie did not want to hear from me. When I tried to call Natalie, Madison would answer the phone and pretend to be a stranger. She would say that Natalie had moved on, or that Natalie was not available and did not wish to be contacted. I did not know Madison had access to Natalie's phone information. I did not know she was intercepting my calls. I believed what I was told because I trusted my daughter." Madison's face had gone from pale to gray. She opened her mouth to speak, but Attorney Miller held up his hand and kept reading. "Every letter I wrote to Natalie I placed in the outgoing mail by the front door. Madison took those letters before the postal carrier arrived. She would return them to me days later and tell me they had been sent back address unknown, undeliverable return to sender. I believed her. I did not check the envelopes for postal markings. I did not question why every single letter was returned. I simply believed that my daughter did not want to hear from me." I felt tears rolling down my face, but I did not wipe them away. I needed to hear every word. "Natalie sent me 127 letters over 15 years. I never saw a single one until 2 years ago. Madison intercepted every letter Natalie mailed to this house. She opened them, read them, and stored them in her personal safe. I only discovered this when Madison forgot to lock her safe during a medical emergency. She had chest pains and left the house in an ambulance. I went into her room looking for her insurance card. I found a box in her safe filled with letters addressed to me in Natalie's handwriting. That was the day I learned the truth. My daughter had been trying to reach me for 15 years, and I never knew. Attorney Miller paused to let the words settle. No one in the room moved. The uncle who had blamed me at my father's funeral was staring at the floor. My cousins would not look at me. They had spent years believing I was cold, selfish, ungrateful. Now they were learning that everything they believed had been a lie, constructed by the person sitting in the front row. The statement continued. Madison did not only steal our letters, she manufactured evidence to turn this family against Natalie. When my husband was hospitalized 10 years ago, Madison waited 3 days before contacting Natalie. She then told the family that she could not reach Natalie and that when she finally did, Natalie said she was too busy with work to come home. This was a lie. Natalie came as soon as she was told, but her father had already passed 6 hours before she arrived. Madison made sure Natalie would be too late, then blamed her for it. I remembered that day. I remembered the phone call from Madison saying Dad was a little under the weather and that I should come when I could. I remembered driving 4 hours in a panic after she finally admitted he was in critical condition. I remembered arriving to find my father already gone and my uncle telling me I should have tried harder to be there. Madison had done that deliberately. She had timed it so I would fail. Attorney Miller kept reading. Madison told relatives that Natalie refused to help with funeral costs. This is also a lie. Natalie offered to pay for the entire funeral. Madison declined and kept the money I had set aside for that purpose. Madison told me that Natalie called me a burden during a phone conversation. That conversation never happened. Every piece of evidence this family used to judge Natalie, every story about her coldness, her selfishness, her abandonment was created by Madison to ensure that Natalie would be cut off from all of us. Madison suddenly stood up. This is insane. Mom was confused at the end. She had dementia. She did not know what she was saying. Attorney Miller cut her off. Mrs. Gibson provided notarized statements dated 18 months ago when her cognitive function was fully intact. She also provided dated evidence letters with timestamps, phone records, bank statements. Additionally, she contacted the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, who confirmed irregularities in mail delivery to this address. This is not confusion, Ms. Gibson. This is documentation. Madison sat back down slowly. Her face was the color of ash. Attorney Miller moved to Part 3 of the will. This section concerns financial matters. He began reading again. In addition to stealing my relationship with my daughter, Madison stole my money. Over the past 5 years, she withdrew over $200,000 from my accounts through small transactions labeled as medical expenses and home repairs. I reviewed my records carefully. None of those expenses occurred. The money simply disappeared into Madison's accounts. He turned the page. 3 years ago, Madison forged my signature to take out a mortgage of $150,000 against this house. I only discovered this when a bank statement was accidentally mailed to this address instead of the P.O. box Madison had set up to hide the correspondence. My home, the home I planned to leave to my daughters, was used as collateral for a loan I never authorized. I watched Madison's hands grip the sides of her chair. She was trapped. There was nowhere to run, nothing to say that could explain away bank records and forged documents. Attorney Miller explained the legal implications. The mail interception constituted federal mail fraud, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. The financial crimes constituted forgery, larceny, over $100,000, and elder financial abuse charges that could carry sentences of up to 20 years. All of the evidence was documented and legally admissible. Then came my mother's final instruction. I am leaving Natalie the choice of what to do with this evidence. She can report Madison to federal and state authorities. She can pursue civil recovery, or she can walk away. This is not about revenge. It is about returning to Natalie the voice that was stolen from her. For 15 years, Madison spoke for both of us. She decided what I would hear and what Natalie would hear. She controlled every word between us. Now, Natalie finally gets to speak for herself. The room was completely still. I looked at my relatives, the people who had mocked me, blamed me, dismissed me for 15 years. They looked sick. They looked ashamed. They could not meet my eyes. Madison sat frozen in her chair, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I gathered all of the files, the letters, the phone records, the bank statements, the notarized documents. I stood up. I looked at Madison for a long moment. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I walked out of the room without saying a single word. For 15 years, Madison had controlled the narrative. She had made me invisible. She had stolen every chance my mother and I had to be a family. Now I held documented evidence of every lie, every stolen letter, every fabricated story. For the first time in 15 years, I had the power. And Madison could not talk her way out of paper trails. Paper trails do not lie, and they do not disappear. 8 weeks after I walked out of that will, reading the consequences began falling on Madison like dominoes. I had returned to Chicago with boxes of evidence and a heart full of grief for the years I had lost. I did not know what would happen next. I only knew that I was done being silent. Attorney Miller called me on a Tuesday morning. His voice was measured, but I could hear something like satisfaction underneath. He told me that the U.S. Postal Inspection Service had opened a formal investigation into mail fraud. This was a federal matter, now completely outside my control. The evidence my mother had gathered. The intercepted letters, the falsified return notices, the phone records had been enough to trigger an independent case. Madison would be questioned by federal investigators within the month. The potential sentence for mail fraud was up to 5 years in federal prison. Attorney Miller also informed me that the bank had discovered the forged signatures on the mortgage documents. They were pursuing civil action against Madison for fraud. The lien on my mother's house would be removed after court proceedings confirmed the forgery, but Madison would be required to repay the full $150,000 plus penalties and legal fees. If she could not pay, her own assets would be seized. Finally, the state district attorney had filed charges for elder financial abuse and larceny. The documented evidence was overwhelming bank statements, forged receipts, falsified expense reports spanning 5 years. Madison's court date was set for 3 months out. Under a plea bargain, she faced 3 to 7 years in state prison. If she chose to go to trial and lost, she could face up to 15 years. I listened to all of this in silence. Part of me felt numb. Part of me felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time: vindication. Not joy, not satisfaction, just the quiet recognition that the truth had finally been spoken and the person who had stolen my life was going to answer for it. The social consequences came next. Word had spread through the family like fire through dry grass. The relatives who had believed Madison's lies for 15 years had seen the evidence at the will reading. They had heard my mother's statement read aloud. They could no longer pretend they did not know. My uncle, the one who had told me at my father's funeral that I should have tried harder to be there, called me 3 weeks after the reading. His voice was breaking. He said Madison had told everyone that I refused to come to the hospital. She said I told her that Dad was not worth my time off work. He had repeated those words to cousins, to neighbors, to anyone who would listen. He had helped destroy my reputation based on lies Madison had fed him. He apologized. He said he would spend the rest of his life regretting what he had said to me. Similar calls came from cousins I had not spoken to in years, from my mother's friends who had whispered about me at the funeral, from people who had looked through me like I was invisible because Madison had convinced them I deserved it. The community that had shunned me now saw Madison as the architect of a 15-year deception, and Madison found herself completely alone. No family member would take her calls. No friend would be seen with her. No one was willing to fund her legal defense or offer her a place to stay. She had spent 15 years building a fortress of lies, and now she was trapped inside it with no way out. 6 weeks after the will reading, Madison came to find me. I had returned to Connecticut to handle the house and meet with Attorney Miller about the estate. I was staying at the same hotel where I had read my mother's first note. Madison appeared in the lobby on a Wednesday evening. She looked like she had not slept in days. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was unwashed. The polished, performative sister I had seen at the funeral dinner was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally run out of lies. She walked up to me before I could leave. "Natalie, please. You have to help me. Tell them you don't want to press charges. Tell them Mom was confused at the end. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." I looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman who had stolen 15 years of my life, who had made me believe my own mother did not love me, who had let me spend every birthday, every holiday, every quiet Sunday wondering what was so wrong with me that my family had thrown me away. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, something colder, something clearer. "You made me believe my mother didn't love me," I said. My voice was steady. I had waited 15 years to say these words. "Every birthday I spent wondering why she didn't call you were answering her calls and hanging up. Every Christmas I spent alone because I thought I wasn't welcome, you told her I refused to come. Every letter I wrote pouring my heart out to her, you read them and put them in a box in your safe like trophies." Madison's eyes darted around the lobby. She was looking for an escape, a deflection, anything. "I was protecting Mom," she said. "You would have just disappointed her. You were always so busy with your career, you never had time for—" I cut her off. "You weren't protecting anyone. You wanted her money, and you wanted control. And the only way to get both was to eliminate me from her life completely. So you did. You lied to her about me. You lied to me about her. You manufactured 15 years of evidence that I was cold and selfish and ungrateful. And it worked. I spent 15 years thinking I was unlovable, that something was fundamentally broken inside me. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" Madison had no answer. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. I stepped closer to her. "You got 15 years. That's all you get." I told her exactly what was going to happen. I would not intervene in the federal case or the state case. Those decisions were not mine to make, and frankly, Madison needed to face the legal consequences of her criminal actions. What I required was simple. Madison would sign a full asset disclosure and a repayment agreement for every dollar she had stolen from our mother. Every dollar documented, every dollar returned. She would sign a notarized statement acknowledging exactly what she had done: the intercepted letters, the falsified stories, the financial theft. That statement would be shared with any family member who requested the truth, and she would agree to a permanent no-contact order enforced by the court. She would never speak to me again unless I initiated contact. She would never come to my home, my workplace, or any place I chose to be. I was done carrying her weight. I was done being the victim of her schemes. This was not forgiveness. I would never forgive her. This was not mercy. She deserved none. This was me refusing to spend another moment of my life defined by what Madison had done to me. The legal system would handle the punishment. I would handle my own healing. Madison signed everything. She had no choice. The evidence was overwhelming. Her resources were gone, and she had no one left to manipulate. I walked away from that confrontation feeling something I had not felt in 15 years. I felt like myself. I had spoken my truth. It was documented and witnessed, legally protected and personally delivered. But there was still one envelope left, the one my mother had labeled, "For Natalie only when justice is done." Attorney Miller had been holding it for me, waiting until the time was right. I was finally ready to open it. What it contained was not about Madison at all. It was about the question I had carried since childhood, the question that had shaped every lonely year of my adult life. Did my mother ever really love me? I had carried that question for 35 years. I had whispered it to myself on lonely birthdays. I had wondered it every Christmas morning when I woke up alone in my apartment in Chicago. I had asked it in 127 letters that I thought had gone unanswered. Now, 6 months after the will reading, I was finally ready to hear the answer. Attorney Miller had given me the envelope at our final meeting about the estate. It was thick, heavier than the others, with my mother's handwriting on the front, "For Natalie only when justice is done." He told me my mother had been very specific about the timing. She wanted me to read this only after everything else had been resolved. I took the envelope back to the house, my house now, and sat at my mother's writing desk, the same desk where she had written all those letters that never reached me. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a thick letter, pages and pages in my mother's handwriting, and a small USB drive. I read the letter first. It began with my childhood. My mother wrote about the day I was born, how I came into the world screaming and did not stop for 3 hours. She wrote about my first steps, my first words, the way I used to follow her around the garden, asking the names of every flower. She wrote about how proud she was when I got into college, how she cried when I left for Chicago because she knew I was going to do something important with my life. Then the letter shifted. She wrote about the years of silence. I thought you hated me, Natalie. Madison kept telling me things that you said I was a burden, that you had moved on and did not want to look back. I believed her because I had no other explanation for your silence. I did not know she was creating that silence herself. The next pages describe the night my mother found the letters. I was looking for Madison's insurance card during her medical emergency. I found a box in her safe containing 127 letters addressed to me, all in your handwriting. I sat on Madison's floor and read every single one that night. I learned about your promotions, your heartbreaks, the life you built. I learned that you asked about me in every single letter. You never stopped being my daughter, Natalie. I just didn't know it. And you never knew I was trying just as hard to reach you. My mother's handwriting grew shakier toward the end. Madison didn't just steal my money. She stole you from me, and me from you. She stole 15 years I can never get back. I will never forgive her for that, but I need you to know something. I loved you every single day of those 15 years. I thought about you every single day. I looked at your picture every morning and wondered what you were doing. Please forgive me for not fighting harder. Please forgive me for believing the lies instead of trusting my own heart. You were never unloved, not for one single moment. I set the letter down and picked up the USB drive. The drive contained audio files, dozens of them dated over the last 18 months of my mother's life. Voice memos she had recorded in secret when Madison was not home. I pressed play on the first one. My mother's voice filled the room. It was weaker than I remembered, but it was her. She talked about the weather, about the garden, about a book she was reading. Simple things, everyday things, the things a mother would tell her daughter if they talked regularly. I listened to recording after recording. She told me stories about my father I had never heard. She gave me advice about work, about relationships, about life. She apologized over and over for the years we had lost. She told me she was proud of me. She told me she loved me. The last recording was dated 3 days before she died. Her voice was barely a whisper. Natalie, I don't know if I'll live long enough to see you get these, but I need you to hear my voice saying what I should have fought harder to say. You were never the daughter who left. You were the daughter who kept trying. I was the mother who didn't try hard enough. I should have driven to Chicago the moment something felt wrong. I should have trusted my instincts instead of Madison's explanations. I failed you, and I'm so sorry. But I loved you, Natalie. I always loved you. Please remember that. Not the silence, but the love underneath it. I sat at that desk and cried until I had nothing left. The legal proceedings concluded 2 months later. Madison pleaded guilty to elder financial abuse and mail fraud to avoid a trial she knew she would lose. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was ordered to pay full restitution of all stolen funds. Her permanent felony record would follow her for the rest of her life. The fraudulent mortgage on the house was voided by court order. The house belonged to me, free and clear. Madison's remaining assets were liquidated to pay what she owed. When she is released, she will start over with nothing. No family willing to take her in. No community that trusts her. No narrative she can control. Whether she learns from this or spends her life blaming others is no longer my concern. I kept the house. I renovated it slowly, room by room, making it mine while honoring what my mother had built. Her writing desk sits in a small office I created from the guest room. The 127 letters are preserved in archival boxes on the shelf above it. They are no longer evidence of theft. They are proof of persistent love. I hosted a small dinner last month with Aunt Helen and a few cousins who reached out with genuine remorse. We are rebuilding connections on honest ground. It will take time, but we are trying. I listen to my mother's voice recordings often, not to dwell on what was lost, but to hold on to what was always there underneath. I understand now that the silence was never rejection. It was sabotage. My mother's love was not absent. It was intercepted. This does not erase the lost years. It does not heal the wound completely, but it reframes everything. I am not the daughter who was abandoned. I am the daughter who kept trying, who sent 127 letters into what she thought was silence, who never fully gave up even when giving up would have been easier. On a quiet spring evening, I sat in my mother's garden and pressed play on the last recording one more time. Her voice filled the air around me. I loved you. I always loved you. 15 years of silence. 15 years of letters that never arrived. 15 years of believing the worst about each other because someone made sure we never heard the truth. Madison had stolen our words, but she could not steal what the words meant. And now, finally, I had received every single one. Natalie's story reminds us of something we often forget: silence can be manufactured. When someone in your family seems distant, when calls go unanswered and letters disappear, the explanation might not be what you think. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones controlling the narrative, deciding what we hear and what we believe about each other. If something feels wrong in your family relationships, trust your instincts. Pick up the phone yourself. Drive to their door if you have to. Do not let a third person be your only source of information about someone you love. This story also teaches us that justice does not require cruelty. Natalie did not scream or threaten or seek revenge. She let the legal system do its work. She demanded accountability through documentation and proper channels. She protected herself with boundaries instead of destroying herself with hatred. That is strength. That is wisdom. And it is available to any of us who find ourselves betrayed by people we trusted. Most importantly, Natalie's story shows us that it is never too late for the truth to come out. Her mother spent her final 2 years building a case, gathering evidence, making sure her daughter would finally know she was loved. Even when time is running out, we can still fight for the people we love. We can still set the record straight. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. We share stories like this every week, stories of strength, justice, and the resilience of the human spirit. Leave a comment below and tell us. Have you ever discovered that someone was manipulating your family relationships? How did you handle it? Your story might help someone else who is going through the same thing right now. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve to be loved, and you deserve to know the truth.